Fuck around, make my 40 pop.
Alright guys, today I'm going to be talking about the staff behind Boruto episode 224, essentially detailing how it's supposed to look in regards to animation, art style, a whole bunch of other stuff like that. I did this right here for last week's episode, and a lot of you guys actually wanted me to talk about this week's episode, so I might as well do that today. By the way, all of this comes from Anime Blue. If you guys don't necessarily know Anime Blue, been doing this for a very long time. Anime Blue has the next, I think, 3 episodes. Yeah, up until episode 227 specifically. So if you guys do want to get a head start and check who the staff is behind those specific episodes, you guys can actually do that. But for right now, I'm just going to be doing Boruto episode 224. Specifically, this episode right here is going to be the chunin exam match between Wasabi and Iwabe, one of my favorite characters. Now, I don't necessarily expect this right here to be absolutely amazing, even though I do see like a big hitter right here, Ichiro Uno. I don't know why, but Wasabi and Iwabe, similar to last week's episode, these are 2 side characters. Now when Sarada fights, that one right there has to be damn near a God Squad behind it, I ain't gonna lie. But this right here, I'm not really expecting much. And from the first thing that I always talk about, you have to look at the studio. The studio is going to essentially tell you how good the episode is going to be. This right here isn't necessarily a definitive thing, but this right here is just my personal metric. Now, Fortune is not necessarily an elite studio. Fortune is usually behind a lot of slice of life episodes, not necessarily well animated fights and things like that. Well, just small fights. So because of that, I'm going to assume that this episode right here isn't necessarily going to be that insane in regards to animation. Art could still possibly be good, because I see some hard hitters right here. And speaking of the hard hitters, I'm going to jump directly into the animation directors. Is going to be right here. Now specifically, I don't really do this, I like to go line by line, but if you guys don't necessarily know, Ichiro Uno is one of the greatest animation directors there is for Boruto and Naruto, put it like that. Ichiro Uno's behind majority of the absolutely elite fights. He was behind Boruto episode 65. If you guys don't necessarily remember that one, this is essentially Momoshiki versus Naruto and Sasuke. Damn it, everybody remembers this. And this right here, to this day, I mean, some people might say it's a little bit different now, mainly because we did actually get to see Ishiki versus Naruto and Baara mode, but some people to this day still actually say that this right here is actually the best episode that they have actually seen. Not necessarily the best animated episode, and I'm going to get into that a little bit later right after this, but I'm pretty sure you guys see this a lot. It just looks very, very crisp. The art was absolutely amazing. This episode right there was just absolutely impeccable all around. Not only that, a lot of people like to say that this right here is actually the greatest animated fight in Boruto period. Not necessarily the most entertaining, not necessarily the best, but just if we're just talking about flat out animation, people say that this right here is the most fluid animated fight there is. And Ichiro Uno was also on this episode as well. So when it comes to Ichiro Uno definitely has a large background of actually being on a lot of very good episodes. Not only this, but also some of the Jigen and Ishiki fights as well. Ichiro Uno is just all around a very, very good animation director. Now we're going to be going to the director, Mitsui Hashimoto. This right here is going to be a very interesting director, mainly because one of Hashimoto's most famous works was actually not Naruto at all. It was actually Dragon Ball, specifically Goku turning Super Saiyan 3. And if you guys aren't necessarily familiar with Goku turning Super Saiyan 3 in regards to the actual anime of Dragon Ball period, this right here is one of the most legendary scenes, point blank period. And of course, I'm not necessarily going to play the actual sound because it's essentially Goku screaming a bunch, but this right here was absolutely legendary. So him being behind an episode like this is definitely good. He was actually behind a Boruto episode before, but not gonna lie, the episode wasn't necessarily anything too crazy. I'm guessing they're trying to just wane him in, like giving him small episodes so he could actually get his feet wet, specifically with the Naruto content. But just saying, this guy definitely knows what he is doing. Now, the next one that we definitely do have to talk about has to be screenplay, and Toshihiko Masuda actually did the screenplay. Getting back on the regular schedule, Masuda actually did work on a lot of Boruto episodes. I think one of my favorite Boruto episodes that he did actually work on was Boruto episode 184. If you guys don't necessarily recall what that was, this right here was actually when Ao was fighting against Team 7. Now, this specifically in regards to animation wasn't necessarily anything too crazy, but it was still a very impactful episode that a lot of people still do like to this day. If I'm not necessarily mistaken, I believe Mujino actually, I wouldn't necessarily say he died in this episode. Matter of fact, he may have actually died in this episode. I don't necessarily want to spoil too much for the people who haven't necessarily seen the early parts of Boruto, but this right here was essentially a very, very good episode all around. I really liked it. This right here is essentially where a lot of the manga stuff was really getting adapted into the Boruto anime, and a lot of people really liked it. Again, animation wise, you're not necessarily going to find anything too crazy. What in the world is this? I'm not even going to acknowledge that, but again, as I said, this right here is still a very good episode. Animation probably wasn't necessarily there, but still nonetheless elite episode. Now, the next thing that I definitely do want to talk about has to be the script, and the script is actually done by Hideto Tanaka. Now, Hideto Tanaka, this right here is a very good name. He was actually behind Boruto episode 206 and Boruto episode 215. I believe a lot of people actually do like Boruto episode 206. This right here specifically when Boruto was actually fighting against the new Team 7 Kawaki alongside the actual real Team 7 minus Konohamaru, which is probably an upgrade either way. But regardless, this fight right here was absolutely amazing. I just don't want you I want you guys to understand though, this right here specifically was not necessarily the episode where Sarada actually did use her Shidori. That specific episode right there was episode 207. 207 was a lot more, I should say, animation wise, a lot better than this specific episode, but nonetheless, this episode was absolutely amazing as well. It actually caught me very much off guard. I thought the big episode in this particular battle was going to be episode 208, but all three of them were absolutely amazing. 206 through 208, they were all impeccable. So this guy being on this episode is definitely a very good sight as well. Again, animation for this specific episode was definitely better than a lot of the average animation, and it was definitely very good. Now, another one is going to be Boruto episode 215. I told you guys he's on this one as well. I think that this right here was actually, yep, I'm right, Kashin Koji, also Ishiki Otsuki coming to the Hidden Leaf Village for the first time. Now, a lot of people, this right here is basically coming off of the heels of Boruto episode 214. A lot of people had a lot of criticism for Boruto episode 214. Rightfully so, man, because that right there in itself was a very big episode where a lot of people did expect for it to be a lot of great animation. That wasn't the case. So as a bounce back episode, we did see Boruto episode 215. Now again, this right here wasn't necessarily to the level of Boruto episode 216 throughout Boruto 218 or so, or 19, where we did see Naruto Baryon mode. We did see Naruto and Sasuke fighting against Jigen, but nonetheless, this episode right here was still absolutely elite. A lot of people actually did like this episode as well. Of course, Ishiki Otsuki's first time in the Hidden Leaf Village, so much hype. But regardless, this guy being on this episode is definitely a very good thing. Super happy to see Tanaka. Again, if I'd rate this whole entire staff, I'd say it's a decent team, and I just say it's a decent team just because Fortune is the studio. If hypothetically, let's say Studio Parrot was studio, I'd probably say it's like an elite team to like a dream team, just because of the sheer fact that we do see Ichiro Uno. Tanaka is definitely a very good character, and of course Hashimoto, we don't necessarily know exactly what he has up his sleeves, mainly because again, he hasn't necessarily been doing a lot of Boruto episodes per se, but the episodes that he has done in other animes, they've been absolutely legendary. But let me know what you guys think about this episode in the comment section below. Me personally, I'm not necessarily expecting anything too much because, as I said earlier, Wasabi and Iwabe, they're essentially side characters. Of course, it's going to be very important to see which one of them actually do go and become a chunin, but let's be honest, we're all here to see Sarada actually fight against some other characters in the future in the chunin exam, see her actually become a chunin if she actually does become a chunin. But it's been your boy Baara B, and we out.
It's a knife.